How inclusive is the disability movement? The case of North West Cameroon. A paper by Daniel Boyko, Willem Elbers, and Auma Okwani. Executive Summary. Disability associations provide services and advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. The question is, however, whether these associations are inclusive. This matters as it determines whose needs and interests are actually taken into account in the associations and whose not. Based on empirical research in Cameroon, this study examines whether all persons with disability can participate equally in disability associations. It examines the extent to which the characteristics of social identity of age, gender, and impairment type affect the ability of association members to express their views and concerns. The study finds that age, gender, and impairment type have a major impact on people's ability to get their voice heard. The level of involvement of youth and women generally remains limited due to cultural norms regarding age and gender, which are not only reproduced by older men, but also by women and young persons themselves. Furthermore, this study finds that the physically and visually impaired are better able to promote their interests than the hearing and the intellectually impaired. This can be traced back to better historical opportunities and support for the former two groups, which are rooted in a hierarchical societal understanding of disability. Introduction. In many contexts of the Global South, disability associations play a key role in providing services and promoting the rights for persons with disability. But how inclusive are disability associations themselves? This is an important question because the degree of inclusiveness determines the extent to which different voices are able to make themselves heard in the associations. Moreover, it points to the underlying issue at stake here, which is whether the activities of disability associations reflect the different needs and concerns of their members. Based on empirical research, this paper explores the inclusiveness of the disability movement in North West Cameroon. It does so from an intersectional perspective. Members of the disability associations are viewed as having multiple social identities, each of which can have an enabling or constraining effect in terms of participation. This study examines the extent to which the social identity characteristics of age, gender, and impairment type affect the ability of associations members to express their views and concerns. The research was carried out in a period of 6 weeks in 2018 using a combination of semi-structured interviewing, 29, focus group discussions, 6, and participatory observation. Interviews targeted officials and members of 8 grassroots associations of persons with disability, officials of the Coordinating Unit of Associations of Persons with Disability, COAPT, government representatives, and officials of the Cameroon Baptist Church Health Services, a prominent local NGO. Participatory observation was carried out at the 8 above-mentioned disability associations, mainly by attending their meetings. Disability associations in North West Cameroon. The network of disability associations in North West Cameroon consists of 64 registered associations linked together through the COAPT. Since its inception, the COAPT has been the umbrella organization for these associations, providing an institutional space for interaction and exchange while offering technical support and undertaking advocacy activities. The 64 disability associations vary in membership size, age, impairment focus, and activeness. The diversity characterizing the broader disability movement is reflected in the 8 associations that participated in the study, as is shown in Table 1 below. Similar to the broader movement, most of these associations are formally open to all impairment types. 2 of the participating associations had a specific impairment focus. Table 1. Key characteristics of disability associations studied. Hope Social Union for the Visually Impaired, HSUV. Year of foundation 2003. Membership size 40. Location Bamenda 3, Mezam. Impairment type visual impairment. Cameroon National Association for the Deaf, CANAD. Year of foundation early 2000s. Membership size plus 300. Location Bamenda, Mezam. Impairment type hearing impaired. North West Association of Women with Disabilities. Year of foundation 2013. Membership size 35. Location Savannah Street, Bamenda, Mezam. Impairment type open. Special Needs Entrepreneur Group. Year of foundation 1999. Membership size 150. Location Fishpond Hill, Mezam. Impairment type open. Kejom Ketingu Association of Persons with Disabilities. Year of foundation 2013. Membership size 67. Location Kejom Ketingu, Mezam. Impairment type open. Goodwill Association of Persons with Special Needs, Parents Association. Year of foundation 2014. Membership size 50. Location Bambili, Mezam. Impairment type open. Harmonized Disabled Group, Parents Association. Year of foundation 2007. Membership size 108. Location Bali, Mezam. Impairment type open. Lukmenora, Light Bearers Rehab Association. Year of foundation 2016. Membership size 40. Location Bamenda, Mezam. Impairment type open. Given the politically restrictive environment of Cameroon, the associations studied do not have the upfront goal of promoting disability rights. Instead, their objectives are related to promoting social and economic inclusion. This is reflected in membership motives that include opportunities for socialization, making friends, meeting people, opportunities for self-improvement, learning skills that can lead to income generation, and benefiting from possible charity. The studied associations aim for monthly membership meetings, although the actual frequency is often lower due to the ongoing political violence in the area and heavy rainfall in the rainy season, combined with inadequate infrastructure. Issues discussed during meetings include upcoming events of the associations, such as trainings and gatherings, problems of individual members, and decisions to be made regarding coordination and collaboration with other associations. During meetings, membership fees are collected, which fluctuate between 500 and 1,500 Central African francs, 0.75 and 2.25 euro respectively. Inclusion of youth and women. In most of the disability associations, 6 out of 8, included in this study, the level of youth involvement remains limited. In Cameroon, persons are considered to be young if they are under 35 years old. In most meetings in which the researcher attended, there were either very few or no youth present. With the exception of 2 associations, youth did not raise their voice during meetings. Men of older age usually were at the center stage of the discussions and occupied positions of leadership. Informants argued that these observations reflect the general situation of youth involvement in disability associations in the North West. In 2 associations, HSUV and CANAD, youth participated actively during the meetings. In the case of HSUV, youth inclusion had been a conscious effort by older members and it was a policy to award leadership positions to young members. The other association is CANAT, which is born out of the efforts of young persons with a hearing impairment. Here, youth participation is part of the association's DNA. Cultural norms on age help explain the lack of youth involvement in the disability associations studied. In Cameroon, youth are expected to adhere to the leadership of and decisions made by elders. In fact, submission to the elders is considered a virtue of the youth. Norms regarding youth appeared to be reproduced within the disability associations, not only by older men, but also by the young people themselves. Some informants also argued that young people are constrained in taking up more proactive role due to the lack of knowledge and experience. The underlying issue here is that persons with disabilities in Cameroon generally have a weak educational background. With some exceptions, women's involvement in the disability associations also appears to be limited. While women did participate in all meetings observed, the number of men participating was always substantially larger. At the same time, it was far more common for men to raise their voice and speak up with assertiveness. This, according to informants, is quite representative to what is happening in other disability associations. Notable exceptions were the two associations of parents with children with disability, Goodwill and Harmonized, and the North West Association of Women with Disabilities, which has been set up as part of COOP's gender policy. Cultural norms also explain women's limited involvement. Respondents explained that in Cameroonian society, women often, quote, shy away, end of quote, from participating, excluding themselves rather than being openly subjugated by men, although the latter also happens. A widespread idea is that women are not expected to take up leading roles and are only, quote, meant to be given out for marriage, end of quote. Women with disabilities explained that it is far more difficult for them to find a husband compared to impaired men finding a wife. Inclusion of impairment types. In Northwest Cameroon, 4 types of disability are recognized: the visually, the physically, hearing, and intellectually impaired. A key finding is that the disability associations in this study are largely segregated by impairment type. This, according to informants, is rather typical for disability associations in the Northwest. As shown in Table 1, 2 of the associations already have a particular focus: visual impairments and hearing impairments respectively. The remaining 6 associations are formally open to different impairment types, but in practice are almost completely made up of persons with the same impairment type. Interviewees argued that different impairments face different types of stigma and barriers to participate in society. It is more convenient for persons with the same impairment to get together as they face similar challenges and stigma, understand each other better, and can share common solutions. The study also found that the physically and visually impaired are better able to promote their interest compared to the hearing and intellectually impaired. Firstly, the physically impaired typically dominate the open associations. In 4 out of the 6 open associations studied, almost all attending members, including those in leader positions, have a physical impairment. In Northwest Region, physically impaired persons are seen as being the least disabled, revealing a hierarchical conceptualization of disability. More about this below. Informants pointed out that in open associations, persons with physical impairments tend to dominate, as indeed was observed. This was put forward as an important reason why the visually and hearing impaired had formed closed associations. The visually impaired can also be considered a leading group inside the broader disability movement. According to informants, their associations tend to be well organized, which is exemplified in the Association for Visually Impaired, HSUV, in this study. HSUV is widely regarded as a strong association and one of the few that openly welcomes young people's participation. Furthermore, the Regional Disability Umbrella Association, CUAPT, is currently led by visually impaired persons. Finally, most of the young persons with visual impairment who participated in this study were university students, which was definitely not true for other types of impairments. The hearing impaired can be considered a specially challenged group within the broader disability community. The hearing impaired generally struggle with educational achievement, and most of the young hearing impaired persons in the study had only achieved primary education. Their organization was facing serious leadership and membership issues. Informants pointed out that the hearing impaired face a communication barrier which keeps them isolated from the rest of the disability movement. This is because sign language is not a widespread knowledge among the non-hearing impaired, and translators are a scarce and expensive resource. Particularly problematic is communication between persons with visual impairment and persons with hearing impairment who simply cannot communicate with each other without assistance. The intellectually impaired are also a specially challenged group within the disability community. They have been represented in this study by their parents or caretakers. The challenges they mentioned were predominantly about the lack of information related to this type of impairment. It was mentioned that more than often parents of a child born with autism or Down syndrome have not heard of these conditions before and simply do not know why their child is different. This makes the situation of persons with intellectual impairments particularly vulnerable to traditional beliefs of witchcraft and superstition. The relative dominance of the physically and visually impaired has to be understood in historical and cultural terms. In the Northwest region, the visually and physically impaired have received more support and for a substantially longer period of time than those with hearing or intellectual disabilities. For example, the first school for the visually impaired was opened in 1952 in the Northwest region, while there has been no school for the hearing impaired until the year 2000. At the same time, the Cameroon Baptist Church has been working on the inclusion of the physically impaired since before colonial times. The historical support and opportunities for these two groups does not come out of the blue. Instead, it is rooted in a hierarchical societal understanding of disability, in which the physically and visually impaired are seen as less disabled than the hearing and intellectually impaired. Due to this, the former two groups are better organized, tend to be better educated, and are more prepared to receive further education and support. End of paper.